All right, everybody. This is another edition of the Web News, and this is a really interesting one, actually. So, Mike found a really interesting blog post, which I think he'll pull up on the screen in a couple of minutes. But the title is "How I, a non-developer, read the tutorial you, a developer, wrote for me, a beginner." And when you start reading it, you're like, "This is just nonsense." But then you keep reading it, and you're like, "Uh oh." Replace a few of these words, and this is actually how a lot of tutorials, guides, and beginner help videos, beginner help articles, whatever you want to call them, how to's, tutorials. This is how they go. And so it's funny. And then we have a real world example of another thing that's related, but not directly related to this, which is something I absolutely hate, which is you take a product or a service, they have a landing page, and this is a public landing page that is supposed to explain what they do. And they're like, we make rocket companies for bottles on top of desks when there's phones sometimes. And you know what? That's a circuit board. And it's apply for a job. What jobs do they have? I'm gonna look for the janitor position because I don't know what they do. You know what I mean? And but I don't even know if they have janitors because I'm not sure if they have a physical presence on Earth. Ridiculous. And that's obviously joking around. But we're gonna talk about this experience, and then we're also gonna talk about because like I'm writing my HTML crash course for my video right now, for the very first like video tutorial, I think very first or close to very first video tutorial I've ever done. And I love visualizing things, and I try to share that in my script and in my teachings because I want to say things that are very recognizable to people, bringing in cars or skeletons or whatever. You'll understand with HTML because it's a very skeletal structure thing, but it's like bringing in things that people are going to understand where they're like, oh, okay. Because just explaining, if you're a person that writes a tutorial, just explaining what a tag is really weird because it's so second nature to me, but then I'm like, wait, hang on, like what, like almost
Like it's
philosophically, what is a tag?
it's really difficult to remove yourself from where you're at right now and think about yourself looking at something with fresh eyes. Someone that's never seen HTML before. Like even HTML as a word is just nonsense, really, for most of the people out
Oh
there.
yeah.
So just starting with that, like the first thing that people are going to see is nonsense. And then as you trickle down, tags mean nothing. Like containers, what do you mean a container? Like I can't put anything inside. Anyway, like literally all of our kind of descriptive words for the stuff that we do on the web to someone that's never done it before is gobbledygook, is nonsense. Now, some of them are real words that people can relate to. Like, again, container is a real word. And when you start to understand what's going on, it starts to make sense. But from the high level, from the first look, it's all just garbage. And that's what this article is going to be, is that you're going to see what it's like for that person that just started learning a technology, and especially in today's web. That's the other part of this article, is like, it was like this before, but we had much less abstraction layers with crazy names. So it was a little bit more straightforward to get in. Like you would get into one little thing and you would figure out what JavaScript is, you would figure out what HTML is, and then you might have to jump into jQuery a little bit and you're like, what the heck is jQuery? That would be like the extent of your like confusion. And now it's but now it's 15 different layers of 15 different frameworks doing the exact same thing, and all of them sound weirdly different but similar. And it's just, yeah, it's totally relatable for someone that hasn't jumped into this. And for us, it's a super good eye opener to start to understand what it's like for that person's perspective, from that person's perspective.
And it also introduces or mentions, like, I don't know if we'll mention this again, but it also shows off a challenge for tutorial writers because I've written a lot of tutorials, written ones, and on the website, and I will struggle with where do I start? Like, how do I know where this person's starting? And it's like, I can't explain to them what the file explorer is in Windows every single time. Every guide would be an unbelievably long. We need file extensions. What's a file? It starts getting a bit silly. And this is a funny thing, but there is going to be some people, and myself included, that are going to struggle to write tutorials that do come down to a more basic level, which is why I do focus personally on visualizations. Because even if it's like I'm talking at this level here, if I talk about like the wheels on a car, it's like most people have the understanding that, you know, wheels on a car turn
I would hope so. Yeah, very
or
much.
rotate, whatever.
Absolutely. Should I share the screen?
Let's do it. Yeah, we're going to read a couple of the sentences here, and then we'll include the link, of course, to this blog post and then to the landing page that we're going to look at later in the show notes on htmlthings.com. So I wanted to bring attention to a couple of sentences, a couple of small parts in here. And so the first one I wanted is in this is in this introduction, if I could speak, which is I've gotten to work for company doing shoe babooing code things, and that's what led me to the Snarfus. So let's dive in. And immediately, that's the first thing you're hearing from this. You're going to be like, this is just silly. But there's a little bit of a quote, like a little citation here. So we're going to click on this number 1 here. It's going to bring us in, and it's a definition. It's not bringing you to a Wikipedia source or something. It's, I probably should recognize company because it seems illustrious, but I do not recognize company or what they do or know what they do. So the thing is, that makes a lot of sense. If you're a person that works for something that's extremely, actually, I have a prime example. I can't even remember the name of it, but I have a friend who is an IT guy for a warehouse. He mentions warehouse tech to me and fires it off like it's nothing. And I will ask him, like, what's like A, B, C, D, E, F? What did you just say to me? Because there's a lot of acronyms. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, no, hold it here. What do you mean? He's like, oh, you were a developer. I'm like, I don't work in a warehouse. I don't work in a warehouse. Like, I would learn these acronyms over the course of 6 months. And so it's so hard for him to simplify because even some of these acronyms will be actual like companies. Like he'll mention company names, or the company name is an acronym of a service or hardware provider for scanning the boxes in the warehouse. And so that's very reminiscent of this. I got into work for a company. Well, if the company is called ABC Inc., what do they do? What is this? Who knows? The next thing I actually want to touch on is the first couple of sentences in the about this tutorial section, which is I first started doing a very simple thing with Snarfus, but the more I used it, the more I saw the potential. Despite the jaggle of the chromas, it's really multi-purpose, and that's what led me to argyling the Pintaphore with the Quagmire instead of the Hoobastank. Which
I
is
love how you're doing it in some
it's
you're
absolutely
like,
crazy,
yeah,
but
yeah. You sound like a maniac.
a maniac that, like, for some reason I mean, I'm doing my best. I'm saying it okay, I think. I hope, because it's ridiculous. It sounds more ridiculous in my head, but when I say it, I'm like, okay, at least it's coming out right, I think. But if we click on this number 2 here, and we go to the bottom, this is something Mike and I have mentioned like 100 million, 1,000, 14 bajillion times, not that many times on the podcast. It is not simple. HTML is thrown away as something simple, not simple. I wasn't born, and as a 3-year-old, I was like, HTML, hypertext markup language. Like, it is not a simple thing to suddenly learn. And Mike and I experienced this in our college program because our college program was not a coding program. It had coding elements, but there was hardware, there was software, there was server admin. It was all over the place. And one of the things that people really struggled with was they were not taught to learn or think like a computer. They didn't understand conditional statements and ifs and variables and loops and arrays and things like that. And so when the teacher comes up and it's just, this is a really simple array. It's what's an array? It's a list of items. What do you mean by it's a list of items? Like a list of, what do you mean? Like a list? It's an array so we can like iterate through it. Well, what does that mean? Like, I'm not even sure what the array means. Now we're iterating through it. It's what does that mean now? And you can see how things go down the tubes. And that's exactly what this person here is describing. So,
Like,
Mike, go ahead. Yeah, please.
This is a foundational issue with education in general, where I'll bring up math, for example. If you don't know fractions, for example, and decimals, getting to algebra is extremely hard, right? If you don't have the foundational layer, then algebra just becomes nonsense. And with the traditional education system, you're just like constantly going, you're like, some people are barely staying on top of it, some people are exceeding. And at the end of the day, the people that are barely like being able to do it are buried, and you start to remove yourself from the situation, because as soon as you have a sentence like this, and imagine this in math again, this could happen where
Very
you have
much.
one word followed by another word followed by another word that you don't know and have no clue what they are. That's it. Like, you'll start to disconnect from the situation. And it's the same thing with these coding tutorials. If you go into a coding tutorial and like a couple words here and there you don't know, not a big deal. But as it starts to cascade, that's when you lose people. Yeah, it starts to snowball. That's when you lose people. And the more of these services that we pack into all of our frameworks and all of our stacks, like tech stacks, the harder it is for someone that's never done this before to spin themselves up. And I've heard many recommendations, and I think I've said this myself a couple times on the podcast, where people are like, don't even learn about the fundamentals, just jump into React. This is what you're going to experience if you're doing that. And some people can get through it. I want to be very clear. Some people are okay with being lost, and figuring stuff out. But a lot of people will get gate kept in the sense that it's just too much. It's an overwhelming amount of garbage text to them that they don't know where to start, and therefore their anxiety or the knowledge gap itself will make it almost impossible for them to get to that next stage of understanding. It's tough. Like, I really sympathize with the latest generation of web development, because for us, a lot of this stuff is second nature because we've gone through kind of like the manual ways of doing all these things, and then all these tools with the Snarfus and whatever. Obviously, that's not a real tool, but that's
And the
what it
very
sounds
simple
like to someone.
thing.
It is a very simple thing in our own heads because we have 7 years of experience doing it manually, and all of a sudden Snarfus came around and it's doing it automatically for us. So we love Snarfus. You can replace this with a Vercel, and it'd be
Yeah.
the same exact thing, right? Like, for 99% of people out there, like, DevOps was a pain in the ass. All the different things were a pain in the ass, and all of a sudden Vercel came around and made it better. But saying that to someone that's never heard of DevOps or servers or server administration is it is a problem. Like, it is an on-ramp problem, because like, the term Vercel now has so much meaning to it that even if they were to look into it, they would be going down like a binary tree of rabbit holes to
Oh
figure
yeah.
out what it actually does.
I'm 100% with you. And like you mentioned the math example, and I think this is why I am a person that likes the visualizations, likes the examples, and I really struggle with this. We're going to show a landing page shortly, but I actually have a very brief thing with math, where a very brief example that ties into Mike's example about math, which is in calculus. A lot of us, like the whole class, more or less, didn't really understand like what we were really doing. You just memorized, oh, today we learned how to derive. Tomorrow we're going to learn like a harder derivation. And the next day we're going to learn how to do applied questions with this. And then we're going to do some thinking and inquiry questions with this. And then maybe a couple of more days of practice or other niche things. And then we're going to have a test on it. And then we're going to go to the next thing. And the school, not to be critical, but I am going to be critical, is immediately turned around myself. But the thing is, like, the school is like the teachers and everyone are so worried about, oh my God, like there's so much math work to be done. There's so many things we need to cover that we just need to rush through it. I remember that virtually every single test, every single unit had people stressing out, myself included, and people were getting like not the greatest marks, 70, and 70 is okay. I'm not saying 70 is the worst, but these are people that oftentimes, at least in my classes, we're shooting for like 90s, and they're getting 70s, they're getting 80s, they're getting low 90s, which is unacceptable to a fair bit of the people that were in my classes. And I was one of those people getting 70s and 80s in calculus. And I remember there's this one time where I was like, you know what? There's this beginning of the chapter in each individual topic, if it's big enough, that we skip in the textbook. And it's like these 1 or 2 pages that explains what we're doing. And we never look at this. We even in elementary school, we skip this. Even in some simpler things like factoring and other things, we skip it. And I remember one time I was like, I got no other homework tonight. I'm going to read this textbook. I was going to see. I got a calculus test tomorrow. I'm going to read this textbook. I read that textbook, got a 98. And that test was easy. I was finished super early. And you know why? Because I read the questions and I understood what I was actually doing. I wasn't just pulling from memory and hoping that I was carrying the two correctly and factoring right and doing all these things that I memorized. Memorization helped me, like the skills that I knew how to derive and things. Those helped me, of course, and those are memorized skills. But the plan of attack for each question came from me actually understanding what I was doing. I remember just thinking to myself, this is crazy. And I got highest mark in the class. And that's not a gloat. My point is that somebody who's learning, especially self-taught devs, a lot of them are being told to skip those chapters. That took me one night. And that's not to say that that coding is so easy it's going to take you one night to learn it. I'm talking about one unit of one test, of which there were 12 tests in a 4-month or 8-month period. There was still a lot more to learn. So I was learning a very small subsection in one night. But the thing is, I understood what I was actually writing on the page. I wasn't just writing down a bunch of random numbers. And I will say this too, to include this little part, is that I do that to a fault where I like really want to understand everything and I get bogged down in the weeds. And so that's too much of a good thing, I guess you could argue. But the thing is that at the very least, I want to understand what company and very simple thing and Snarfus is. I don't want to be in the case of, is Snarfus carrying the two? Is very simple thing Laplace? Is this other thing algebra? Is this an algebraic company? And it just starts becoming silly. It's I want to know where the point of attack for these questions should be, and I need the understanding at least at a certain level to do that.
Yeah. I think the other real big challenge right now for this kind of situation is that it's almost hard or impossible to teach modern web development without making these ridiculous sentences.
Yeah,
That's the real big challenge. And so what really needs to happen is there needs to be, similar to what you're saying in with math, there needs to be these unit steps that people can take, and the people that need to take them will take them, and the people that don't. And so there needs to be these options of not having a sentence like this freak people out, right? Like, again, if this was a sentence that had just company in it and everything else was logical,
yeah,
you could
yep.
figure out what company is. What I see the problem coming in is that when these sentences compound with companies, Shabadooing code, Snarfist, like those three things together is what makes the problem, right? And so I don't think you can teach the entire web development stack without making these sentences, but I think what needs to happen is a better roadmap or a better path for people that do need a more foundational knowledge set to figure that out, and so that they, when they get to this stage where this is necessary, this is absolutely necessary in some education path and some for some tech knowledge, they already know three of the or two of the three. That's
Or
the
at the very
key.
least, they know. Oh, I think I read about that in chapter 2, and they can quickly
Exactly.
refer back.
Yeah, it's not something new to them. It's not shabadooing. It's a known-ish word to them. Like that.
Yes.
That's when you want it to be. That's where you want it to be. That's where you want to be when you're starting to teach someone new. You want some of the concepts, let's say 80% of the concepts, to be somewhat familiar, right?
Like it's almost if you were to like do a visualization, it's like you want it to be like clear enough. You want it to be like they just have to quickly put on some reading glasses. They just have to quickly refer back. The whole article is not so blurry that no glasses in the whole world will clarify it for them. And that's what like
Absolutely, yeah.
this is like a total disaster. You want it so that you give the person some reading glasses and you're like, you're new at this. You're not going to read this perfectly. Read through this article. If you can't see some of these words, pop these reading glasses on and it'll make sense. And those reading glasses are the visualization of referring back, and maybe you'll learn it in a paragraph or two, and it's a part of the learning process, like Mike's saying. You don't want it to be so freaking blurry that only the best of the best readers can read it. That's insane.
That is correct. Yeah. And this, if people are listening to this and not watching it on YouTube, first of all, I would recommend you come to YouTube just so you can see what we're seeing. But I'm showing the rest of the article here where it's taking you through step-by-step tutorial, quote unquote, obviously tongue in cheek, where they're just like, here, put this in terminal, and it's just gobbledygook, and then go to this folder and it's just gobbledygook. Like, it's just nonsense. But I've seen these tutorials. Like, I think every one of us has seen these tutorials, and some of us have brushed them aside because they make sense to us. But sometimes you do get to a point where you're like, even you, like a senior dev is out of their element, and you're like, I don't want to do this. You just skip it. You're
Well,
just like, I can't. I'm gonna go find something simpler because this is insane.
well,
I have
do
to
you
refactor
remember?
my whole system.
Do you remember, Mike, when we were taking like Linux in college? And do you
Yeah.
remember like we'd never done terminal stuff? Everything was Windows Server or Windows proper, Pro or
Mhm.
whatever. And we were learning how to use like the terminal for the very first time with Linux. And we used like VI, the text editor, one time. And I remember I asked the professor a question. It was the next day, another lab, and we were trying to get something to work. And he's, "What's the default text editor in Linux?" I'm like, "Sorry, I don't know." He literally gave me a weird look, walked away, kept looking at me, and just went to the front of the class. And that was it. And I was like, "Okay." It's like he's so flabbergasted that I'm so stupid. Yeah, you're right. Here's the thing. I am stupid. I'm here to learn. This is lesson 2. I've never done this before. That is a default thing, sir, that you think of, and now I think of instantly. That is not something that I thought of. I did not come out of the womb going like, the default text editor of Linux is VI. We enter that into the terminal. Sometimes we use the sudo, like super user do command. Dumb.
Like it,
Like
yeah,
that is dumb.
it's a bad way of teaching.
Bad way to.
Look, I mean, yeah, like looking down on someone. Like Matt, I think you've happened more than anyone at this point. Not because, again, I don't think it's because you're stupid or anything like that. I think you're actually pretty smart in most things. I think you've just been super unlucky with the teachers that we've had. And yeah, bad experience, terrible experience, and it
I'm
stays with you
sure.
for a long time. Matt finished school like college. What is it now? 10 years ago?
And I remember that.
I think it's been 10 years since we finished college,
We're
and
close to it.
it's still something we bring up at least once monthly. So with some of these experiences, so this stuff sticks with people when you're being like super blunt and you're not the main problem here, right? The main problem that this is pointing out, this article is pointing out, what we're talking about is pointing out, is not being able to put yourself in the shoes of the person that's just beginning their journey.
Yes.
That's the main problem. That's the cusp of the issue. So if you can't do that as an educator, you're becoming the biggest problem. And again, it's been 10 years. Matt still remembers this shit. It still affects him. Most of it is mostly a joke at this point, but
Yeah,
it
yeah,
still
we're messing
affects
around.
him. Yeah, it still affects him to a certain degree. So it's important to understand if you're ever going to be teaching someone, and you don't have to be a formal educator to have this happen. You can be a mentor to a junior developer, and you could speak to them in this way, and then you could scoff at them not knowing what VI is, or scoff at them not knowing what NPM is, and that can affect them further down their career. So you need to, I really want to get that across to myself as well. I think I try to do this pretty well. Like I handle this pretty well, but I'm sure I've done the opposite sometimes. It's important to put yourself in the shoes of someone that has never done this before and allow them to find the solutions themselves and guide them to those solutions when you need to guide them, but do not throw gobbledygook at their face and then scoff at them and look at them weird when they don't understand what Vercel, TRPC, and a million other words that I can't think of right now, Vue, React, Svelte, Tailwind, like all this jargon, realistically nonsense to the regular person. If you throw something at them with jargon and they don't understand it, you have to give them a second. Give them some time to figure it out and point them in the right direction for figuring it out if it's something that's necessary to figure out.
Yeah, the thing too is, and I think you can actually pull up that landing page if you want now, because I think it leads in nicely into that. But like the one major like thing here is if you're a person that is new to the terminal even, and you've always used visual like UI based file expiration. You don't even think about it as file expiration. You just know, oh, I put things in files. That's how I organize it. I have names and there's certain files I don't want to touch. I don't want to break things. And you get to that point, and then when you start using the terminal, it's another experience. And people are like, oh, it's like people will like scoff at that. And then what was on the screen was all those like terminal commands. It's the person doesn't even understand what like a CD to users, my user or CD home or whatever change, like CD change directory. Many people are, especially in modern age, are going to be like, what's a directory? And that doesn't make them stupid. Like it's ridiculous. What is stupid? I ask a lot of questions of my car mechanic, and he probably thinks, "What in the hell is this guy talking about?" But I'm always curious. I'm like, "What broke? How do, I don't know. How does that work?" Roughly, like he knows. I just want a really brief, like almost an AI summary, and so he'll tell me, and I'll be like, "Oh, is that like a huge job?" He's like, "Oh no, it happens all the time." It's like, okay, no idea. And so we'll go on to this landing page here. This is an example of a landing page that Mike and I, again, have mentioned on the show, where a landing page to me is supposed to be something where someone with absolutely zero knowledge is at the very least able to figure out what this generally is. And then they can choose whether or not it's like for them or too advanced for them or something like that. And this is a freaking nightmare. Move fast and break nothing. End-to-end type-safe APIs made easy. Experience the full power of TypeScript inference to boost productivity for your full stack application. So is this a project management tool? Because it mentioned productivity. Now I know what TypeScript is. I don't know what inference is. I know what TypeScript is. I know what a full stack application is. I understand what end-to-end type safe is, actually. I understand what API is. But even with all that knowledge, I couldn't really tell you what this is. And people throw around the term or the acronym, whatever you want to call it, TRPC, like it's nothing. And I get that feeling again where that teacher's glaring at me like, man, what a dumbass. Yeah. Like, I am dumb. I need an explanation. And to me, it's like, I'm not trying to rip into TRPC. I feel as though we need a better way to describe things specifically on your marketing landing pages. That may not always be possible. Maybe it's not always possible, and I acknowledge that, but I'm going to scroll down. Mike, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down there, because I got my own version open here. And there's a part down here, and I was asking Mike about this. So I was like, this bottom right content box, batteries included. We provide adapters for React, Next.js, Express, Fastify, AWS, Lambda, Solid, Svelte, and more. What do you mean by batteries included? Like you're adding a bit of fun to the landing page, which I appreciate. But this is a complex thing. What is this? I was actually just recently talking to a friend about something, and I was telling him how back in the day, like this is a cell phone, and we all know generally how to use this. What if you're like a person that does not understand how to use this? You've never used a cell phone before. You don't like nothing really shows you how to use these anymore. We used to have commercials where it would be like, take a look at how productive you can be by like pulling down on the top shade and seeing your notification. In the BlackBerry 10 days, it'd be like, check out the BlackBerry Hub, do this gesture, take a look at Google. Google, you can talk to Google now. You get a little bit of that here and there. Like you get like the sort of like talk to Gemini, but like you're not really told what is Gemini. You're told maybe here and there piecemeal, but there's not those like device tutorials. And I don't know about you guys, but device tutorials or even game tutorials or game showcases, the first time I play through that game, the first time I use the device, I do what they showed me on stage. And then I start to extrapolate. I'm like, slow, is there a better way to do that? And then I look that up and I start learning. And that's how I expand. But we don't have these explanations for stuff, I think, anymore. I think everyone just expects everyone to understand tech. And it's, again, we don't have DNA memory. How are people supposed to get into stuff? And I understand the kids are getting at a very young age, are getting into touchscreens, and it's like they're learning like crazy because they're small children. I understand that there's that. But like to me, it's like there are so many features on this phone, and there are so many features on the latest phone that I don't even use. Why? I didn't seek it out and I didn't know it was there because no one told me how to use it and no one told me it was there. And I've seen like people where they're like, Samsung's getting rid of, I don't know, AI gobbledygook. I don't know, sometimes making this up. And it's like, man, how to use that? Like, it's man, I didn't know one tell me it was there.
And I think with the like if we go back to the TRPC conversation, this kind of goes back to what I was saying before, where they can't really create the perfect landing page to address every spectrum of user. But TRPC as a service itself, or not even as a service, as a package itself, is one of the problems. I love TRPC. Let me make that clear. I use it on pretty much every project that I create at this point. But this is a pretty monumental leap for developers to understand, going from simple backend server to front end server, and then all of a sudden having this thing that kind of combines the two together and makes it so that the two can communicate really effectively. That's a pretty decent way of explaining it, but that's a very shallow explanation, because what it's doing in the background is way more complicated and way more interesting, in my opinion. And so when you bring this up to a beginner, like if a beginner were to go into a tutorial that had one of the pieces of technology being TRPC, you're asking them to learn so much, not only back end and front end, but you're also asking them to learn how back ends and front ends talk to each other. You're asking them to learn the difference between what an HTTP request is and what an RPC request is, which is like the remote, like the part of TRPC.
I don't know,
RPC.
actually.
Exactly. That's the thing. You're giving multiple layers on top of learning a regular full stack framework just to make one part of their experience slightly better. And
Yep.
so if someone were to suggest to go into like literally go to React from zero, and part of React was learn TRPC, that's throwing an immense amount of stuff at them. And that's exactly what that article is referring to, where once you start going down the rabbit hole of all of these pieces of technology that make our lives easier, I want to make that clear. These TRPC is freaking awesome and I love it. It becomes immensely overwhelming for newer developers, and it is an issue right now that I can see moving forward, where people will just drop it. Like they'll come to this landing page and be like, I don't know what's happening here. This is insanity. Like, look at what's happening. If you're looking at my screen, there's like stuff moving around. There's code. There's a server.ts file, a client.ts file. There's like editing code. There's red squigglies. There's shit going on here. And to someone that's used it a million times, it makes sense for the most part. But to someone that's just figuring it out, this is overwhelming. I'm gonna be honest right now. When I first learned about TRPC and I came to this landing page, it wasn't very different, and I was overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed where I had to step back and I had to learn the pieces that built that TRPC stands on to actually be able to put together what it's doing, how it's doing it, and stuff like that. And I had to implement it without knowing everything, and then break it. And etc., etc. Like it was a pretty big leap for me. But this again, this is just one example of many that you're going to go down when you go down the web development path where it's tough. And Matt's right. Like these kinds of landing pages, they're definitely not designed for everyone. And I think this is one of the problems, but it's something that I don't know how to avoid. This is not designed for a beginner. This landing page, not designed, not meant for, not targeted at a beginner web developer. This is
Right.
meant for someone that's done this before, someone that's run into the issues that it's trying to solve before. Right? This is
And
the
that
inherent
understands what's being
problem.
typed here. Like it
Correct.
understands what's being typed here.
Yeah.
Like if
So,
someone is like HTML and they're just learning that, they're just like, what? See, people keep mentioning TRPC. I'm going to click on this. They'll be like, is this HTML? What is
yeah.
this? And you start going down that rabbit hole, right? Of you can't explain everything. I totally
No.
acknowledge that. But maybe like a policy where at the top, below the fold, more advanced things can happen. But at the top, we explain that, what this is in like very plain English, and people be like, oh, that sounds advanced. I know generally what it is, but that sounds advanced. And then they would move on. Because once you scroll down, it's okay, like that doesn't sound like it's for me. Because it'd be like to give a visualization. Like if you were like, here's like a truck, like an F-150 or an F-150 like Rancher edition or whatever. It's what is the Rancher edition? You can't just say for ranchers. Give me the skinny. Oh, it's off road, it has bigger tires, it's higher up, it's this and that, it does all these things, and then I look at it, I'm like, I'm gonna drive on the road, and I don't know what that weird hauling word means or whatever. Like maybe it hauls a certain type of like thing or whatever, and maybe the payload's way more than I need, and then so I'm like, oh, it's a lot more money, and I don't do that stuff, so that's it. And then once I scroll down, if I want the stats and stuff like that, like the more advanced stats, then fine. You can't just be like F-150 for ranchers. What does that mean? Can these only be driven on a ranch? What is, come on,
That's
like
it.
what?
Yep.
It's ridiculous. So, and that's a silly example, but it gets the point across, I think.
Absolutely. I think that's it.
I think that's it too. Yeah. So that's the web news. I don't know what we're going to title this one yet, but I'm going to link the blog post as well as the TRPC landing page as well if you want to go check them out. And again, we're not ripping on TRPC. This is like literally an issue that I see on many landing pages. Mike just pulled this one out of a hat, and I agree that it fell into the right category. Anyway, that's it. This is the web news. This is our informal show. Hopefully you saw this on YouTube via video, but if you're listening on audio, we love you just as much. And that's it. We're signing out.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.